Hey everybody, it's Nathan with the Birds and the Lees coming at you on a Tuesday night with my wife Kim. Kim, how are you?
I'm great.
Good. So we are continuing the ever increasingly longer saga of the Lee family as we
Right.
are giving our background, giving just our life, for these several episodes, just so you can get a better understanding of who we are. And if you haven't, you can go back and there's some episodes prior to this where we don't really get into those kind of conversations. We talk about kind of what's on our mind and some different topics, but we might circle back around to those topics again. So we have been sharing our story, and we are at a pretty major crossroads in the story is what we're going to get into tonight. And just by way of recap, because every good episode needs a recap, every good TV show is, on the previous episode.
Right.
Yeah. So on the previous episode of The Birds and Lees, we established that Kim and I had been married in ministry for 2 or 3 years when I received a job offer for a new job that I was looking forward to taking in the Northeast. We won't get into where exactly specifically, but it was in the Northeast. And we were looking forward to that because, it seemed like the next best opportunity. It seemed like where God was leading us, which I do believe He was, but this was the next step from my home church and where Kim and I had been attending and where I was on staff. But we go back to the day that I accepted the job. I accepted the job at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and we were supposed to meet for dinner that night. And because I was taking a bunch of the kids in the youth group to a movie. And we were going to meet at a local restaurant, have dinner together, and then I was going to go to the movie, and we were going to celebrate this new job. And I get a phone call right before we go into dinner from you. And if you want to go ahead and share what the content of that phone call was, go right ahead.
I think maybe backtracking a little bit, I was at work and you were also at work, correct?
I was. I had been at work all day.
Okay, so you were at work. I was back and forth with the realtor in the city we were moving to try to get us settled and somewhere to stay with, whatever that looked like. I had called him, left a message. He called me back, left a message with me. He called me, and finally we connected. And we were talking for 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden my phone started ringing, which was, I wasn't in I just typically didn't get enough calls for somebody else to remember, this is before like phones were on your hip all the time. There were still landlines. We still had one at our house.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So for me to get a call on my cell phone at the same time as another one was pretty rare.
Yeah.
I clicked over and it was my dad's office. So if you remember back, we talked a little bit about, I grew up with my dad. I was his main person in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. His other cohort, if you want to say. I get a call from his office that I am very close with because he had been there for years and they were great people. And his office was letting me know I needed to go to the hospital ASAP or take my dad he was at the office and he had collapsed. So we did not know anything other than that. And relatively healthy, I would say. I mean, when we got married, there was no major issues.
Being in his, I guess, 50s at the time or 60s, closer to.
Well, he almost 60.
Almost 60. Nothing that would really lead us to believe there were any real health scares, though he had had a few health issues prior to this.
So I was hoping for the best, that this was just a random act of stress. He knew we were moving and we were accepting the job, that this was something other than that, that was not very serious. So I rushed to the hospital. I called my boss, which also was my mom. And thankfully, even though my parents are divorced, she has always been very understanding of taking care of my dad as I need to.
Yeah.
And so I called her immediately and I said, hey, I know there are no clients. I was in a position where clients would come to me.
Yeah.
Nobody else is coming in for the day. I'm going to go take care of my dad. She totally understood, asked me if I needed anything. I literally drove probably 90 miles an hour to get down to him. So I get to the hospital and he looks awful, awful. And I got that gut feeling you get when you walk in somewhere and you know this isn't going to end well.
Yeah.
So I called Nathan. Nathan knew the whole time. Although, again, we were back when cell phones weren't necessarily.
I mean, we had them, but
we had them, but like to use them in a hospital, Wi-Fi didn't exist in the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, this is 2008, so the iPhone 1 had just come out and nobody had them.
And we didn't have them.
Yeah, we didn't have them.
And so we were, trying to get a cell signal inside a building. I kept having to go out because it wasn't like you connected to Wi-Fi to get out or anything. So, I called Nathan maybe 3 times through the process to update him, and they were tragic updates. I mean, we went from, from being joyful to my dad's literally collapsed and making no sense on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Within 2 hours of being there, they found massive tumors, we'll call them at the time, in his body.
Yeah, I mean they were showing spots in various places, if I remember, including
we had hoped
kidney, brain.
It was all over. We didn't know at the time it was in his brain, but it was.
That's right. We found that out later.
But it would only take a common sense.
Well, yeah, I mean the anticipation, or anticipation is lack of a better word. The projection we had in our own minds is we were going to find it pretty much anywhere. I mean, and you're right. It went from joyful anticipation of a new job and a new place in life to. I remember the very first word you said to me when you found out it was essentially cancer.
Yeah.
Is you said, "I can't go with you."
Yeah, I mean it was. We were having to make some very, very quick choices. We never. I mean that. This is 6:00 at night. We still haven't even gotten to the point where we were supposed to have dinner together.
Yeah, we didn't have that,
and we're having to make these really lifelong choices in the middle of an emergency room.
Yeah.
My dad's side of the family is very kind, but it's his brother was at the time all that was alive. Very sweet family, but that it was not their place to make the choices for him, and they shouldn't have had that.
Yeah,
resting heavy on them. So I was making those choices for him.
Yeah.
It ended up me. So he had a dog, and I had to go back to. Oh, I remember that now. I had to go back to his house.
Yeah, you did have to go back to his house,
and he was fostering, so I had to stay at his house till like 11 at night.
And I think our daughter was with my parents at the time. I think she was being babysat.
She must have been.
Yeah, so she was not with us. She was with my parents, who lived right down the road. And I remember you telling me, go ahead and go to the movie with the students, and we'll hang out with them. There's nothing you can really do.
Yeah.
But at that point, there was a lot of I'll be honest, there were a lot of confused, mixed feelings. I mean, there's
right.
It's hard to go from one feeling to another, like at the speed of light, and all of a sudden now the whole future's in this very confusing and kind of questionable state because you have no idea now.
Right. So what we have is my husband moving across town to a sweet church that's expecting him to be there.
And when we say across town, we mean...
I'm sorry, across the country.
Yeah, we mean 1,900 miles away.
Yeah, it was 1,900 miles away. At the time, we lived in one town. My dad lived in another that was an hour away. Mm-hmm. So that was tricky as well. Just the logistics of having a baby and trying to get everybody where they needed to be for any given reason. At the time, they were not allowing children in hospitals. That added a whole nother, there was a flu outbreak or something.
Yeah.
That added a whole nother level because you were leaving in 2 weeks to go across the country.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, it was 1,200 miles, it was 19 hours, 1,200 miles. So
well,
just so we know,
it
doesn't matter. It was very, very long way.
Um,
but for my purposes, I got to be.
Then there was the look on the doctor's face, and I never had to hear the words, "It's terminal," because the minute they did the x-rays in the emergency room, I knew.
Mm.
And so by 10 o'clock at night, I had gone from going with my sweet little family across the country to a new church to now I've got to figure out how to take care of my father who is dying and be a good mom and a good wife and part of this church across the country.
Yeah. And having only been married really 2 years. I mean,
right.
4. We've been married 4 at this point.
Okay.
Because we were married in 2004. This was 2008.
Okay.
Almost 4. And so, still 4 is not very long.
Right.
It's not long at all. And,
Right.
I'm not proud to say that there was a lot of really difficult feelings for me in hearing I can't go with you. Because that's, I get it. And in hindsight, I completely understand the situation. And a lot of people have helped me, over time understand. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
Right.
But it is a punch,
Yeah.
because you learn that families always, the family you go together and, but you never talk about unique circumstances where, one spouse maybe is all the parent has. And,
Right.
so it was, I think for both of us, there were, obviously you were face to face with what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm on the periphery trying to figure out, okay, do I not go? Do I tell him I
Right.
can't right now, or turn the job down? Because up to this point, I can still stay where I'm at.
Right.
I think.
Right.
Who
knows?
Who knows? But what do you do? You've just agreed to this,
Mhm.
and they've put together moving packages and
Right.
everything. So, I don't. Interestingly enough, I can remember pretty much everything about that day, but I can't remember a whole lot after that.
That's funny because I really only remember getting the call
Yeah.
and the doctor coming in and the look on their face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. I can remember your phone call to me. I can remember everything leading up to that. Where I start to I don't remember the conversation that night. I don't after we got home. I don't
think there was one.
I think we just went in and went to bed.
Because I don't think I got home till about 1.
Maybe that was it.
I had to go help my dad with the foster dog. Oh, and we brought his dog to our house.
Yeah, we did. I think I went and got our daughter and I came home
after the movie
and put her to bed, and then that was pretty much it. And really interestingly enough, from there until the point we made the announcement at the current church we were at that I was leaving, I don't remember anything. And that was about a week.
I do remember it because we had to make the next day I had to figure out what we were going to do.
Yeah.
Like I had no more time than one day. So what we were going to do was sell both of our houses and move him up to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah. So we were headed to Pittsburgh and, we had to figure this out. And then it becomes a situation of how long does this take? How long do you get till you can get there?
Doctor's appointments, getting him everywhere he needed to be. He was not admitted to the hospital, if I remember. No, he must have been because we had his dog. So he must have been in the hospital.
I think he was in the hospital for a little bit. And then he came to our house to stay after I had moved out.
That's when he had the brain surgery, isn't it?
I think so. And so he did not come to the house until I left.
Right. So he went into the hospital in the emergency room and then spent 5 weeks in the hospital.
Yeah, something like that.
And I, during that time span, listed both of our homes, staged, boxed up, moved, listed, and sold both of them.
Yeah. Right? And I think so. Because I left on August 15th. Actually rode with my dad. And I remember that day because I had to say goodbye. That was the hardest goodbye I think I've ever done. I said goodbye to you. I said goodbye to our daughter, and then jumped in the car and drove to a place that I'd only been to once for an interview.
Yes.
And was going to live over a garage, which was a nice apartment over a garage. It was nicer than anything I could anticipate. But that was a long drive because I just didn't know, you're in this shell shock kind of thing.
Yep.
And, you get there and the very first thing, you have to call people and say, hey, I'm coming, but Kim's not. And here's the situation that's going on. And to be honest with you, there are some places that do not see a husband and wife in that situation as being any other option than you drag your wife with you.
Right.
And so there was a lot of, you're immediately going into a job where it should have been one thing, it becomes another.
Right.
There's
contention. There's
changes. Yeah. You've already got to learn something new, and you're going to a place that you don't know anybody, but a few people that you've met once. And in the meantime, you're going by yourself, or you're back home by yourself. Not really by yourself. You're taking care of dad, and you're taking care of daughter and dogs, and selling houses and everything. And you know, at the same time, I'm hearing, okay, when is your wife going to get here? And then I'm speaking because I've got, two things on either side of me telling me what to do. And so it was, to be honest, it was not done well. I acknowledge that. It was not the most fun thing in the world. And it was probably, looking back, it was probably some of the worst months I've ever experienced.
Well, I mean, saying it was months is being very generous. Really, it was
Well, it was 2 years.
but we'll get to more of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely what I wanted to be a really solid, fun, engaged move for all of us, and to have an adventure going across the country turned into just an awful emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
And there was certainly some families on both ends that just knocked it out of the park in service and loving. And I'm not saying any of that did not happen.
No,
It
we had people who took care
absolutely
of us.
did.
Yeah.
But the emotional toll of the decisions I had to make, thankfully there was no one else, because I don't have any siblings. He was not married.
Yeah.
I could make those decisions quickly, and nobody was there to tell me no.
Yeah, there's no contention or anything like that.
Right. I can't imagine what that would have been like, trying to move across the country and making decisions literally with it. Okay, well, here's the new diagnosis. Well, I got to make a decision tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I'm so thankful for all the families that, helped and kicked in, because there was so much that they did, providing meals. And there was just there were some days that I had a roll, and that's all I ate all day, because I didn't have time to do anything else.
Well, we get to this point where, we get there, your dad's diagnosed. We feel that things are kind of getting to a place where we have a little bit of a plan. And that plan was originally to bring him up, and we were looking for houses that did that. And the housing situation took a little bit.
Yep.
We eventually did find a house. We found a house and closed on it a couple days before Christmas.
Yep.
Well, maybe about a week before Christmas. And then you went back to Dallas. You flew back here.
So we ended up as a family kind of agreeing on, I would stay in Dallas half-time, kind of set him up for being alone for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And then I would come back to where we lived.
Pittsburgh,
Pittsburgh. And then I would stay there for a few weeks, and then I'd go back and see. So I was living across the country.
Yeah, we were. And then when I had the chance, I would come home. I would come back to Dallas, for a week or a weekend and stay here. And in between there, you're staying with your mom, who then moved. Got a new house.
In the middle of that?
I thought she moved in the middle of that. Maybe not. Maybe she had just moved.
I can't remember when she moved.
So they moved in. They had moved into a new house. They were having some renovations done. So you were staying there. Meanwhile, the moving company, which is through the church, is you're trying to figure out what's going to go, what's going to stay. You got to fill up two houses on moving trucks.
Those sweet movers. So it ended up being that our house, both of them were closing within like 3 days of each other. And so we essentially boxed up everything at my dad's house in type. I mean, it was like all the pantry supplies, all the cups and all the dishes, threw them on a truck.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't have the bandwidth or the time to think I need to separate these.
Yeah.
So when sweet Nathan, when the truck got to the new house,
that was funny.
The truck gets to the new house. It is freezing outside.
It was 5 degrees outside the day that they showed it. It might have actually been in the negative.
I don't know. It was cold. And poor guy, I told him, I was like, just put everything you can down in the basement, and I will go through it when I get there.
Yeah. It was funny because I think it actually was like -2, but it was interesting because you have to keep the doors open when they move. So the guys finished the job in record time because they were so sick of being out in the cold. They moved two houses worth of stuff into the home in like 2-3 hours. It was pretty amazing, and they had a huge crew. The second thing was that the internal temperature of the house dropped down to 25 degrees, and it took me an entire day. And I had to stay I lived in the house for a couple days, and
Yeah, the heat was a little tricky. It took
the
us a
heat
while to figure that
was
out.
tricky. But it was on. It just took a long time to get it back up to that temperature. So the first night I was freezing,
Yeah.
and sleeping on a mattress. But we get back here. It was actually Christmas Eve. I flew back, or day before Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
We closed on our house on Christmas Eve, the one here. And we closed that and took care of all that, and we got a Christmas together. And I do remember, I think this was the year that you and I came back up, and your mom brought Jessica up at New Year's. We came back together.
Some of those details all
kind of run together.
Yeah.
But we came back together, and then Jessica came up with your mom, and we spent time unpacking. And the other side of that is, meanwhile I'm trying to get into this new job, and immediately from the beginning in the new job I realized and I had mentioned this before, this whole situation taught me in regards to a job that you really have to listen to what's being said. But, I get into this job immediately, and the situation was that the previous youth pastor had been there for some time, was well loved by everybody, had great relationships with people. And you're in this place where everyone's comparing you to him the whole time. And everything you do is measured against who this person is. And you hear a lot of, well, you can't measure up. You got big shoes to fill, or leadership is coming to you going, if I was in your position, this is what I would do. I actually had somebody come up and say, well, we're waiting to see what kind of bang for our buck we get from you. So immediately it feels like I'm to be honest with you, I'm in a hostile environment. I know there were a lot of great people, but I've never really, I've talked about this, but and I've talked about the aftermath of this, but from the very beginning, it was not, I did not feel good there.
I've always told you that one of the oddest reactions I ever had with that church that really struck me as funny is when you were interviewing, and I came into you. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah,
it came to the part where they interviewed me with you, and so we were talking about, they asked me some questions like, what are your best qualities? What are your worst qualities?
Yeah.
All those kind of things. And we got to the dog that we had at the time. So Carly we mentioned Carly before. She was a trained working dog, and absolutely amazing in demeanor, super fun, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Good with kids. And they asked, who does your family comprise of? And I said, well, Nathan and Jessica and my other child, Carly. And I explained who she was, what I did, my background. And the response was like I was talking about an alien.
Yeah, there weren't, these weren't people who really not a lot of them had dogs and stuff. So it was really funny because there was a lot of like, what?
But that was my first twinge in my stomach of that's a weird reaction to a pet. That's a working dog. I don't know. It was just it was an interesting reaction that really threw off.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was my first. And so yours was definitely.
When I got there, and it's a hard, the Northeast is very different from Texas and the South, right? People are very blunt and direct, and I don't think they're intentionally being mean, but no. They just, there's a different attitude. Pittsburgh is, it's a cool city, and people are very proud of it, but there's always a sense of you're an outsider.
Yeah.
If you're not from there.
And that has its benefits.
It's definitely, there's a lot of close knit, city pride, but I just remember sitting there and early on feeling very, not just on top of the fact that you were here, but you just don't ever feel like you're going to fit there, and you're trying to do your best in ministry. You're trying to do your very best, and
it was hard to make friends.
Yeah, and this was a youth group that had kind of seen a drop in attendance and had an expectation. Interestingly enough, it was hard for them to let go of the previous guy and how he had done things, and I'm different, and that's just how it is. And I even had a conversation with the previous youth pastor, and he said, you got to go do your own thing.
Right.
But the issue became that there were many within leadership and many within the church that didn't want a new thing. and they wanted it to be what it was. And
So
there's personality differences.
I think there's something worth stopping and talking about here for a minute, as far as we want this to be a ministry to those who are working in ministry
Yeah.
and how you treat those that are coming in and
Yeah.
what that looks like.
Well, yeah, I agree. And I've had the opportunity in, now to be in a position where someone who works for, who's I'm directly supervising is in that position to step down. And I think handled it well in the fact that you've got to get back and you've got to step aside for the new guy to come in to, or the new person to come in to make those relationships. And in fact, when the person took over for me here in Dallas, I made that distance too. And looking back on it, I really honestly think I lost some relationships with students because of that, because I don't think they understood. And really, it was we had to do that to support the guy who was in there.
Yeah.
And I think, and there are days where that kind of hurts a little bit because some of that, and as we get into the story, it's probably going to get a little more raw than raw and little
Yeah, I mean, this is just the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, this is where it kind of starts, and looking back now, we're at a point in our life where, there are people who we were very, very tied into in that stage of life who now we don't speak to, we don't talk to, not because they did anything wrong, but it's almost like we were forgotten, and we'll find that out later when we return. Because we're going to come back to Dallas in this story.
And we pretty much were.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the whole world moved on, and that's hard, and that does happen, but it does feel like when you return, with the exception of a few, that, you're all of a sudden forgotten. And that's hard when you put 7 years into a church to feel that you're easily replaced. Right. On top of that, the situation which we're going to get to when you do return, and there's so much to this story that I don't want to take like 12 episodes to get. Well, I think we can dig down topically on things.
Yeah. We'll save the 12 episodes for our book.
Yeah, for the book. We'll write no. Ultimately, where this is all heading is, we were there 3 years.
Yeah.
3 years of up and down. And in the middle of that, from the very beginning, we have your dad being diagnosed.
Yeah.
We have to live in two separate places, kind of commuting and only seeing each other for a few weeks at a time. And then, a month or two in between.
So dad was diagnosed in July. You moved here, or we sold
August.
houses and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so you moved here and you moved to Pittsburgh in August. Houses were for sale. I was taking care of my dad in the hospital and at our home while it was being shown.
You were kind of back and forth between the two.
And then the houses got contracts, and we bought a house.
Yeah, we bought a house
in November.
Yeah, late November.
And then December, my dad is still in and out of the hospital. I'm still taking care of him. You go to live in the new house we close on.
Yep.
And get all our stuff there.
Yeah.
Sometime December, January.
And then you're back up there for a little while. And this is where this little pattern starts when you're here. Right. You're with me. Mm-hmm. You're with me, and then we get a phone call from a nurse that your dad, because at a certain point we realize we can't bring your dad up there. Because one, his health has deteriorated to the point.
So at this point in the story, I can tell you he was still living on his own.
That's right. He was. Yes. And that was the apartment. Yeah.
That was not the issue. When she called, I know which call you're talking about. She wanted me to find somebody to be his, cheerleader or his advocate. Sometimes I lose words.
Yeah.
She really wanted me to find somebody to be his advocate, which, let me tell you, so hard if you have a parent in the hospital you're trying to care for across the country to find an advocate that is unbiased in Dallas.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hard.
Yeah. And so you're looking for that. He's living in an apartment, and we did get a little bit back and forth on that first year to see him. You would go back, and then I'd come down.
Yeah, that's when I was living back and forth.
You were living back and forth.
Stayed in one place.
Yeah. And there was a point. So 2008, 2009 is this whole year, and in that 2009, in the midst of all going back and forth and all of this high end stress, and I'm running into hiccups at the job that are difficult.
So what happened?
Well, you just relationships with the parents, relationships with the staff.
It was real hard, even being there for a year.
Yeah.
To connect.
Yeah,
with
it was
people.
It was very hard to connect. There were a few that we did, and you got really, really close to, and we still are close to them and still friends. But overall, the entire time on this staff at this church, feeling on kind of on the outside, and not, there was always, in fact, somebody at one point told me that I was not the senior pastor's choice.
Yeah,
and I don't remember who said that, but they said I was not the senior pastor. He wanted somebody else, but he was talked into, and I can't remember who said that. And that may not even be true. I don't know, but that flavored the experience, and that kind of set the tone and colored the experience. In hindsight, I should have just gone and talked, right? I'm pretty young, even 7 years in. I'm still, and I'm coming off a bad experience with the previous church where everything was kind of in turmoil, and the end of it was a bad experience, I should say. We're in turmoil, and so there's a little bit of nervousness about being a part of that, and two different personalities. So in the middle of that, I'm feeling very much on the outside. I'm being told, you need to get your wife up here. This is not the way marriage should be. You guys shouldn't be apart. Yeah. You need to be the man of the house and get her up here.
That's hard to hear.
It is hard to hear, and it's hard to how to process and handle that, because then you start, you're sitting going, okay, these are these big spiritual men, spiritual giants. You're looking at them, they're leading churches, and they're telling you this, so you're trying to relay that information back to your wife, but then there's all of this tension and anxiety and hurt, and you say it wrong, and then it becomes a fight. And
I think one of the things we didn't do that we probably should have done is sat down with the elders at one of their meetings and explained to them what was going on.
Yeah, I think if we had been able to do that together and up front say, hey, this is what's going on, instead of relaying secondary information, maybe that would have been better.
They understood. They understood I was going back and forth to see my dad. I'm not sure they understood that when I was gone, he was there to fend for himself.
Yeah.
As a sick man with cancer.
And I even explained that to them, and they still didn't get it.
Well, we're not gonna
get into that. Yeah. But
and I just think it's worth. I hope there's an elder that listens to this one day and realizes they need to love their staff a little bit better.
Well, I think they do, and the experience since then is very positive for us. This low point is going to, as the story goes, is going to yield a lot of really great healing and good stuff that comes out of it.
But it takes a while.
And, there's so much that I think we can go back and talk topically about. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's this tension, and we're back and forth. And even in this year of 2009, where this is happening, in the midst of all of that, you get pregnant and you're going to have another baby.
Yes.
And so immediately there, you're a pregnant mom now on the other side of the country. Mm-hmm. We've got a window, because at some point you're not going to be able to travel.
Yeah. So some of this goes back to me being a counselor and knowing enough about stress and anxiety on a pregnant mom and what that can do to infants and babies. I was very aware that I was on a limited time span from stress alone of being able to fly.
Yeah.
Because that stress was tremendous on me, responsibility and emotionally.
Yeah. And so we've got this window, and so there's the possibility that our son's going to be born in Dallas or in Pittsburgh. We don't know. Yeah. And, and I can't, so people are asking me that, and I can't give them the answer, because it's like, I have no idea. I don't know when this is going to happen. So there was a point, though, there was a time I came to visit, and it did end up, this was when the stress and the whole weight of it became very clear. Yeah. Was standing in North Park Mall at the duck fountain and watching our daughter throw a penny in the duck fountain and say, I wish my mommy and daddy were in the same place, basically, is what she said.
Yeah.
And that was hard. I mean, that was like getting kicked in the face. And at first we were good. I think at first we said, hey, that's just the reality of it. But it was when I was getting on the plane, that's when all of the emotions came out.
Talk about that cry. Oh,
Yeah, that was probably the biggest cry I've ever seen you do. That was one of the top 5.
that ugly cry,
Yeah,
girls.
in the middle of
That
public.
cry. Oh, it was so bad. Nathan goes to get his ticket. This was before they really had the check-in kiosks.
Yeah, I had to go get my ticket.
He goes to get his ticket at the counter, and I'm of course trying to be brave. I've fought through all this.
And you're holding a daughter's hand.
I'm holding my daughter's hand. All I have to do is make it out of the airport without him seeing me cry. He goes up to get his ticket, and I try to fit in a good ugly cry before he turns around. Girls, you cannot do that.
Yeah, you can't fit that. And I see it. And we have this conversation, and I do remember what you saying this to me is like, okay, I got to come.
Yeah.
This is the decision.
We were, so in order for me to leave, it was going to take 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
To make that happen. And I knew that if I made the decision now, my last flight that I would have, because this was, he was due in April.
Yeah.
This was about February, give or take.
Yeah, something like that. It may have been a little bit earlier.
But I knew if anything happened, it would give us a little time to fly across the country and do what we needed to do. So we had to decide now.
Yeah, so we make this decision. You did a great job. You got your dad set up in a care facility. Mm-hmm. At this point, his cancer has progressed to the point where, there are moments, and we haven't really gotten into the details of this, but lucidity sometimes was gone. I mean, he was confused at times. He was starting to make this kind of up and down.
It was that classic cancer, awful, terrible, no good experience that every person never wants to go through.
Yeah. And so, we got, at the times you were in Pittsburgh, we'd get a call that this was it. And then we'd get ready, and then, oh, wait, he's fine.
Yeah.
Or he's pulled through, and now he's...
We had a great care team, but we learned not to listen to them.
Yeah, that was what was interesting, is because they were convinced this was it, and then it wasn't.
Yeah.
In the middle of all this, we have people praying for us. We're sitting here, we're praying together, we're praying for the situation. We always are aware that God is working in this, or that at some point he's going to. We just can't, when you're knee deep in it, that he's going to take care of you, but you don't know. Right. Sometimes pain and anxiety and all that becomes so overwhelming, it's very hard. And it becomes very hard to do the things that you should. Your daily routine becomes difficult.
Oh, I mean, I still think I'm getting back to being a normal, healthy daily routine from that experience. I mean, it's 3 years of my life. Yeah. But there were blessings like the food that was dropped off. One morning, this mom, she was ridiculous and made me everything from breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks for the kids.
Yeah.
And I just cried because I couldn't do any of that. We were living off like bagels and a chip if I could find it. So there were stories of people, when I said my dad needed to move into an apartment for a year, we had more vans than we knew what to do.
People showed up. They did.
When it was time for my dad to move out of the apartment, my mom showed up and cleaned his bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
a big thing.
That's a huge, we could do a whole podcast on what it looks like that is such a great example of what it looks like to put aside everything that you
serve
and just do what's right.
So we, all this is happening. We get him taken care of. We get him up there. Things are not great, but we
get him in the facility.
We get him in the facility. Yes.
So one of the things that happened was we had bought this house for him to come and live in with his own space. He missed the cutoff because of how healthcare works. He missed the cutoff and could not make it to Pittsburgh by about 10 days.
Yeah. So that was hard because, you miss that window and you feel like there's some guilt there that, if we just moved a little quicker or whatever.
I still have guilt over it.
Yeah. And so we get to this point where life it's not great, it's not perfect, but it's calm.
Yep.
At least, and we're coming up on the birth of our son.
Yeah.
And, my mom's up there taking care of our daughter. We go into the hospital. Everything goes great. We have this awesome baby boy in the midst of all this stress who comes out super healthy.
In the shape of my rib.
Yeah, because of being stuck there for so long.
Yeah, big boy.
Big boy like that. And we have 24 hours with him.
Yep.
And then we get a phone call that your dad has passed away.
Yeah. So I had a C-section,
mm-hmm.
Just like with the first Jessica. And so that meant with C-sections, for those of you who don't know anything about it, you have to stay in the hospital a little bit longer because it is major surgery. They want you there for 2 or 3 days, depending. So yeah, so my dad passed away and I had to call the nurse in because I wasn't supposed to walk without them in there.
Yeah.
And I am a preparer. I love to be prepared for anything that could come my way. And I had a binder that I took with me to the hospital.
Yeah.
That had everybody I would need to call upon his death. There was one sheet. And while laying in my hospital bed, I had to go through that list and tell each and every person that my father had died.
Yeah. And I go, and of course, I'm taking our daughter back with my mom, and then I come back to be so there. Well, I didn't even find out until I was pulling out of the parking lot. I mean, you called me as I'm pulling out of the parking lot.
As soon as I could.
Yeah, as soon as you could. And, I'm driving, and you're obviously torn up, and very rightfully so. And so,
mind you, I couldn't really ugly cry
because it hurt.
My stomach in pieces.
Yeah, so that hurt. But the hospital was awesome. They took Garrett, and they said, look, you do what you have to do. We'll take care of him. We don't have to, if you don't need him for a while.
I had the sweetest nurse. Even the intake person came up to just see how I was doing.
Yeah. And so, because obviously it's not a situation that happens every day.
Right.
And we can go all night about this.
Yeah.
But I think it's best if we, as we kind of talk about this situation, because this situation we feel at this point in our lives is going to be okay. It can't get anywhere. Anywhere from here has got to be up. Right.
I mean, I think some of that mourning and crying was it's finally over.
Yeah.
Nothing can get really worse than this right now.
And this is 2010.
Yeah.
And so, there's mourning, but there's a relief because now it feels like, as a family, we can focus. Yeah. We're finally here. We've arrived. We
can serve people without being inhibited.
Yeah. We don't have to go back and forth anymore. Mm-hmm. We can do this. And, that year of 2010 is, while hard, it is hard because the mourning process is hard and there weren't always great times. Right. You're right. It does feel, because we were able to come back and have a memorial for your dad. We were able to take a week and stay in a hotel, just us. Mm-hmm. We got to fly Garrett at a week old, which is crazy.
Is not the word I would use.
Well, he did great. he did fine.
Yeah,
he spent his first week and a half sleeping on the floor of a hotel room.
And props to Jess, because she must have flown 10 times in 1 year.
Yeah, she was great. She was an expert at flying.
Yeah.
She knew what she was doing.
She still is.
Yeah, she's no big deal on that.
Yeah.
So you get to this point, and like I said, and we've said it multiple times in this episode, we'll go back and talk about topical things of that, because each one of these things feels like a lesson in itself that we learn.
There's so much that we learned and are still learning.
And so, we get to this point, okay, we're at rock bottom. We're rock bottom. Her dad, Kim's dad, has passed away. Skip's no longer with us. We have a son we have to raise. We're trying to explain this to the people at this church. Here's something I will tell you, and having learned this, and something I had to learn and work at. It matters if you invest the time outside of the office into your people.
Yeah,
it matters.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to the office and ministry staff and you're just turning it off when you walk away,
not gonna work.
You're missing the chance to be something for someone.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but truthfully, there were very few within the staff itself who they offered to help with things. Yes. And that was great. Yeah. They would watch the kids, but there was always felt like this distance between what was happening and what we need. We needed friends. We needed, and we had, and there were some who were, and we're still friends, but we needed people, and very specifically, we needed people in high places to be close,
to reach out for real,
to
come by and pray with us at our home.
Yeah. And that as members of the staff. And I can remember, and I will tell this because I don't want you to have to relate this, but I can remember interaction with someone in leadership, following the return from your dad's memorial, and literally saying, "Hey, sorry about your dad. I've been really busy."
Yeah.
And, that's the beginning of where I think I'm going, okay, something's wrong. Something's really wrong with me. Not the place necessarily, but something's really wrong with me being here.
You know, it's funny hearing you say that. I think that's what's the lessons we've learned are driving how we do ministry now.
Well, absolutely. And so some of this, I'll be honest with you, some of this is we've never really sat down and, we've told bits and pieces and we've told it to certain people.
Right.
Some of this is like a cathartic thing for us just to get it out and say it, because now we're far enough down the road that we can just be honest, like, hey, you know what? That sucked.
And I think we need to slow down at this point when we're telling the story.
Yeah.
And really start talking about what it did to our ministry and how it served people.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Obviously.
Everything that happened from the time Garrett was born forward changed everything.
And I think what we'll do in the upcoming is, okay, we'll lay out the story, but let's go back and, like you said, let's tear them off into bite-sized pieces, because this is a massive story. We could be here all year.
And we aren't the only, we know.
There are so many people who've been through stuff like this.
And that's why it's so important for us to just get it out there.
And in fact, we learned it as we were going through it. Stories started to pop up, and even after the fact, stories started to pop up of people who experienced. Before even people who experienced the same thing.
Which is funny. We should start it out that way. How that all went down.
Yeah, the next time we'll start it. Yeah. So that's a funny one. But where we're going to leave it is this: we've hit bottom. We've lost a parent, but we're climbing out.
Yeah,
we're climbing out, and sometimes you can.
I don't have to get on the plane for like a year.
You don't.
It was great.
But here's the thing: is at no point, good or bad, do we stop making sure that we're aware of what God's doing. And I think, unfortunately, when things start to get better, that's when our guard goes down, and we feel that we're handling it on our own, and that we've got it in control. Because at any moment.
I see, that may be how you were feeling. I really grieved. I mean, that was
well, you grieved.
Year.
I'm not saying that, but grieving is climbing out of the hole.
Yeah.
Is the way I see it.
No, I'm saying I didn't feel complacency.
Well, no, I don't thought it wasn't complacency for me. Yeah. It was a relief that I no longer had to worry about things.
Oh.
It was kind of I don't have to worry about anything anymore. Everything's good.
I don't think I ever got to that point.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's wow. This was a big one. So
I think it's good. We got through all this stuff, the history.
We got through the history. Now let's talk about the lessons.
Yeah.
Because what's coming next is the big lesson.
Yeah.
And so we really appreciate you guys listening. Once again, if you want to reach out to us, you can email us at thepodcastinglees@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts, input, maybe mutual experiences or things you want to ask us or talk about, we'd love to hear from you. And we will keep putting these out as much as we can, when we can, on a regular basis. But we really appreciate you guys listening. Kim, until next time.
Yeah, we'll see you.
All right.